Namo Bismillah Krishna Vistara Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamini Namaste Saraswati Devi Guravani Pacharani Nirvesesa Sunyavari Prasatya Satana Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaja Ki Jai. So I joined in 72, 1st of January, and he was already well established in the Hare Krishna movement, being Prabhupada's personal servant. And in the first years I didn't have much contact with him, but then later I was on the GBC body for a good while. We were together on many issues and also apart on many issues. Because that was the nature of my relation with Tamal Krishna Goswami was very sweet. I experienced that part, but I also experienced the thunderbolt, the other side. And it was a very alive relationship. I visited him in Dallas. He showed me, some boy, he had some disciple who showed me in the kitchen in Dallas how to use a 3-tiered cooker that Prabhupada had. This boy is here in the audience even. Was a young brahmachari at that time. And we talked about so many things, and he came to Ireland. It was his last visit to Ireland, his first visit and his last visit to Ireland. He came to Ireland. And then in the last days of Srila Prabhupada, I was with him, practically speaking, for more or less 3 weeks. His service was to tend to Srila Prabhupada's needs together with Bhavananda Maharaj, and for the section what I saw, Bhakti Shru Swami, I was there in the morning from 2 o'clock to 8, and my service was to sing, so I sang for Prabhupada all the way up to the last day. And so I saw how he was interacting with Srila Prabhupada. This was very sweet and personal. When the issue came up of whether Prabhupada should go to Govardhan or not, he and Bhavananda were on one side and I typically was on the other side. I remember that one. But when it came to Prabhupada, he had left the body, and Tamal Krishna was myself, we helped Prabhupada to fix up his body. I remember I said we need to take a gamsha to wrap around Prabhupada, because Prabhupada had no rigor mortis, so I lifted up the chin and Maharaj wrapped the gamsha around Prabhupada's head that you can still see on the pictures when Prabhupada was carried through the 7 different temples of Vrindavan. And so during our course of, after that, there was this one issue where we had some disagreement. I wrote him a letter, I still have it, on my computer, and I said, Maharaj, you should, why being a big fish in a small pond of ISKCON? He said, you should preach to presidents, kings and queens. And later he told me, I met him in Lalachua, and he said, actually this letter said a lot to him. He said, actually it propelled me into the decision to actually go to the university, to Cambridge. That's what he told me in Alachua. And so we had a kind of a relationship that was intimate, but at the same time I was distant, and we agreed on many issues. I mean, I wish Tamal Krishna Goswami would be here. We would be in shape, in much better shape. Because many things that happened after that would not happen with Tamal being on board. That much I can tell you. So he was extremely influential, and he was extremely conservative. He didn't have a problem with innovation, but he was very concerned with changing. Anything what Prabhupada introduced and what he liked to be continued. He was extremely conservative in that, and I shared that part very much with him, because I'm also quite conservative when it comes to the crunch. And so I remember the last day before he left I met him near the Garuda. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to America tomorrow morning." And he said, "Who's your driver?" And I said, "Such and such." It was the same driver he took the day later. Yeah, you know. And so I flew to Los Angeles, and I got a phone call from India and said, "Prithu, you know, this and that happened, and you got to tell us disciples." So I went, I cried. I remember I went into the Govinda's restaurant. Swavas was sitting, he was eating, and I said, "Hold on to your seat." And I told him what happened. And it was very painful. You know, it was a shock to my life, you know, because you talked to him just before you, on your trip to Calcutta, and next thing you hear, you arrived in America 2 days later, and it was the end of the story. He was gone. So by the end of the day, I can say only this: Tamal was huge. He was a huge personality, an enormous amount of influence in ISKCON. And when he left, it was a huge loss for the world. Huge loss for the world, and a huge loss for ISKCON. That much I can say. And so I'm glad I did have his association while he was there. I'm glad we agreed on many issues. I'm also glad we disagreed sometimes. It was a kind of fire-water relationship we had, and I'm not the only one who had that with him, you know. And he could be so sweet, and he could be very heavy too. And sometimes I wouldn't buy it. So I'm glad that I can speak here in glorification of Sri Tamal Krishna Goswami. You're very fortunate. He was an icon, no doubt about it. One of the most, if not the most important disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And I really feel sorry that he is not anymore directly involved in the ongoings of our day-to-day ISKCON. It would make a huge difference, that much I can say. You know, it was no doubt about it. His influence was tremendous. And once he left, it veered a little bit to the liberal side. And it was a loss. Sri Tamal Krishna Goswami Ki Jai.